Okay, you guys ready to get started? All right, just give me like 5 minutes. I'll be. Welcome to DG's Open Mic if it's your first time here at LayerOne. Hi, I'm Data. I'm one of the folks who run the conference. It's been a whirlwind morning, so sorry if I'm a little rushed. We're a little bit behind schedule, so I'm just going to give you the cliff notes. Welcome to LayerOne. How many of you is it your first time at LayerOne? This is where you do this. Yay! Holy shit! So you are all the people that registered in the last 48 hours, right? Because holy shit, do you guys like to wait until the last possible second?
Okay.
So, just some quick announcements. At the same time this talk starts, all the villages and contests will open. So if you are interested in winning CTF, you should ignore these guys and go play that. Specifically, Capture the Flag starting. There's an impressioning contest in a lockpicking village if you're interested, so go try that out. The Soldering Olympics round 1 will start, and as you know, time is critical, so go play in that. There's tons of stuff. If it's your first time here, just make friends, have fun. I will announce more when we're not pressed for time. But coming up next is hacking drones for fun and knowledge. Todd, are you all good? Cool.
Well, welcome. Oh, that's way too quiet. Hello. All right, cool. So welcome. This is Hacking Drones for Fun and Knowledge. I'm Jack, and this is Erwin. Right, we've been doing a little tag team on this, so you get to know and love both of us. Of course. So our roadmap for this little talk, we're going to start a little bit with the background, just kind of like what we're looking into, right, what we're talking about. Then we'll move into attack surfaces, pivot from there into findings, and then we got, everyone's favorite part, uno reverso, and then we'll wrap it up with a nice little conclusion at the end. So the background is why, right? Like why talk about drones? Why care about drones? The shortest and like simplest part of this is it's the Internet of shit, but it's kinetic, right? Like whether you like it or you don't like it, you care about it, you don't care about it. These things are going to be flying over you in the near future. They're going to be buzzing around. They're going to be dropping off Amazon packages, picking things up. Your Grubhub is going to like bounce into your pool. Like it's coming. It's just a matter of when, This market's going to double in the next 5 years. It's going to be billions and billions of dollars. So it's coming, right? It's going to be big. And the research into it right now, not as big as it should be, in my opinion, at least. These things are coming to the skies near you, and not all of them are friendly, right? Like people are going to use these things for nefarious things. So the sooner that we can make these into like secure platforms that make harder for evil people to do evil things with them, I think the better we'll all be off.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely important to know how to secure these things.
So like, if we break down the attack surface, right, you're gonna hear like unmanned aerial system, UAS, you're gonna hear drone, you're gonna hear all of it. And like, what we mean when we say UAS is it's the unmanned aerial system. So it's everything. It's the drone, it's the controller, it's the remote, it's all of the software that connects to it. That is all the UAS, right? The drone itself is really, we're focusing on the aircraft. And this is an important delineation because certain components of this reflect in different ways, right? So like you might be beating one component and that, renders all the other components, useless. So the attack surface on the drone itself, the vast majority of these are going to be a GNU Linux or an Android host, right? They're going to be pretty much a walled garden in most cases. Like you're not just going to be able to hook this thing up to your computer. It's not going to just present like an ADB interface. It's going to be a bit of a rigmarole to actually gain a foothold. But once you're in, only a couple walls deep. Generally what we're seeing a combination of like push, pull, and then what I'm going to call control panel for management, right? So from a push standpoint, a lot of these drones are operating on the precipice that or the principle that you're going to push a sane and safe configuration to them on boot up. And then on the pull side, we have things like RTSP streaming, pulling down the video feed from the drone. You're pulling data off of it. And then other manufacturers are going with more of like here's 10 buttons. You can press 10 buttons. You can twist 2 knobs, but you can't touch anything else. So there's a mixed level of enforcement and authorization on these things. And I think that makes for a very fun attack surface. So the remote itself, right? This is an important part of it. This is the remote, the controller, how a human interfaces with the drone. Originally, this started as like apps on app stores, right? You'd go to the Google Play Store, you'd go to the Apple Store, and you would download, whatever, X manufacturer's app. Then you'd have some kind of like radio front end that would physically connect to the phone. And once it was physically connected, it would, expose a radio. You'd have your little radio comms. As time went on, and iOS restricted the kind of peripherals you could attach, these sort of like fell off. And then on the other end, certain tensions in a geopolitical space kind of forced some of the other manufacturers out of the Play Store, out of the Apple Store as well. So now a lot of this is what they call a smart controller, which it's got smart in the name, so you're in for a good time with this. But these smart controllers are generally, Android 6, which, as we all know, is like the beacon of security. All right, I definitely want to have something flying around with like giant plastic razor blades running Android 6. And then that smart controller is going to have like some kind of USB peripheral radio. And that's going to be used for the actual control link on the drone itself.
Yeah, and then the other part is like the way these are being used. So if you have a smart controller that's probably not connected to the internet, and you're not going to get any possible updates. So if some major vulnerability comes out, you can kind of forget about ever updating any of these systems. But then if you look back for like, okay, like let's say maybe, well, then I want to run everything on the app. So I want to run on my Android phone all the apps because I will get the updates. But maybe you won't, because like you're running a very, very old like drone that you just purchased off of eBay, and you want to play with it, but you can't install it because like there's some kind of dependency issues, and you have a massive problem because you literally cannot install it anymore because the software is too old. So there's kind of like advantages and disadvantages to both sides, like both being able to update and being able to run legacy.
You lost that complete, Google Play or Apple Store level of like not only updates but also of trust. So it's just like, oh, I want to fly this old one. Like, I guess I'm just going to go find myself an APK on the internet, and that's also very safe to do on your Android 6 host that has like something flying through the air.
Go for it. So now when we talk about like kind of like the other attack surface is like that's the RF link side. So like on the RF side, you can have either one or more different kind of like control channels being run at the same time. So you can have things like command control, which is like you're instructing the aircraft to go left, right, or commanded some specific function. Then you have your video, so like video being broadcast back from the UAS to your side. And then, of course, you may have like any telemetry from like any of the other payloads and things like that that might be running on it. So, and then they all operate on something called, at least on the small UAS side, they're all operating on something called ISM, which is Industrial, Scientific, and Medical. And at least in the US side, you have all these frequencies here. They're like 902 to 925 megahertz. They have your 2.4 and 5.8 gigahertz. Like these are like your regular Wi-Fi bands. They're unlicensed, so anybody can use them, and they're primarily using only these. So for higher frequencies like 5.8, that's where you'll have your video feeds coming in because they require high data, but control can kind of be on any of these. And of course, the lower the frequency is, the further you can control the aircraft from. And then we've seen some also like maybe not in the US specifically, but like there's some drones they're using beyond visual line of sight. They're using 4G and other types of communications, so you can like really stretch out like the distance of them. The other part is when we talk about like FCC, they require the use of broadcast modules for broadcasting the positioning of the drones, because these drones, as they're being operated, people need to know, other aircraft need to know that people need to know where they're at. So like all of them are mandated since I believe 2016 or somewhere around this time to require remote ID. So remote ID broadcasts this module. Now, if you have a very old drone, it may not have this specific functionality. So you have to attach specific broadcast module to it. And now, of course, that is also another RF thing that is being broadcast. And depending on how all of these things are integrated, the area where this is kind of being operated, how much interference there is, like all of these RF links could be conflicting with each other, especially if they're not built within the same system. And then just being able to use the drone in the US, you have to, at minimum, pass a trust test. I mean, it's a very simple test. Like you can try it unlimited amount of times until you get it right. So like, I mean, like it is very good. And then the other part is anything non-recreational, which means including volunteer work, commercial work, anything else other than that requires Part 107, which requires studying for like actually a pretty complicated test, but that ensures that you really know and understand all the things. So all the operators of UAS kind of have to be in one of these two buckets to operate them legally here. So that's what we have here for that. And now when we look at and kind of dissect the attack surface here, we see like this like, like long diagram that like kind of enumerates all the things, but just kind of like ignoring that for a second and like focusing on like the things that really matter. So like from the attack surface, like the most risky part of the remotely controlled drone with radio frequency is jamming. So jamming is like Jack and I here are talking on stage, and then somebody here in the audience just decides to like scream, and then I can't hear him, he can't hear me. That's what jamming is. So like basically like they prevent them from hearing each other, and this does not require any type of reverse engineering, understanding of anything. Like you just have to be able to scream, and then they won't be able to run them anymore unless they're using some kind of better system to kind of avoid that part. The next part is replay attacks. These can be kind of like smart or not smart, like depending on how they're being used. Like if they have a drone, they can maybe like record it doing a specific type of function and then like send it out and then cause it to do something, turn on lights, do stuff like that. Or it can be just recording your drone and then sending it that, and then that may cause it to go to some weird state. So then we talk about like deauthentication, specifically with Wi-Fi, because there's some very interesting like phenomenon. Like if you just deauthenticate some of these drones, they just fall off the sky. Like there's some issue within the control state that like they're being deauthenticated, they will just like kind of like go to a very weird state because they will not know how to reconnect, or maybe you don't allow them to reconnect. So, but again, there are some differing parts with that. Then we talk about like GPS spoofing. So this has been publicly documented, I believe in 2012 or 2016. University of Texas did a study on this and kind of proved that this is true. And of course, like in the news, we've seen that this is definitely a possibility. And this can kind of go from ways of, okay, like you're in a completely different location with GPS, or something like really, really smart where the attacker is guiding the drone in a very specific location by manipulating GPS coordinates. Because this is one of the only ones externally to the drone that you are not specifically controlling as a remote control operator that is being ingested. So if this signal is manipulated in some ways, it can cause some things. Then we talk about eavesdropping. So of course, like you can eavesdrop on the command channel on the aircraft, which you can kind of tell what they're doing. That's kind of useful, but kind of not to an extent. I mean, like maybe if specific coordinates are being sent, that might be useful. But something that we're going to talk about later in the presentation is eavesdropping on the video link. So we talked earlier about like one of the RF links is video feed. So if you can eavesdrop on that and then see what the operator is seeing, then you may be able to tell, okay, this is what they're looking at, this is what they may be interested in. Like let's say like you're in charge of security of a very large facility. You will want to know, like even if you can't shoot it down or do anything like crazy, you want to be able to see what that sees, and that ultimately is an attack surface, and it's important to have these feeds encrypted. And then the last and definitely the most interesting part will be the protocol attack. Like this is when we talk about hacking, like we really want to talk about, okay, I'm going to hack the protocol, I'm going to recreate this, I'm going to figure out how this works. Like the most popular being used in the small UAS is Mavlin, but then there are definitely others. And then this requires, of course, understanding of the protocol, having the protocol spec, reverse engineering the protocol, and then kind of working from there to cause just about anything because you have the ability to talk their language. And then for testbed for RF and drones, this requires a very specific setup. So this cannot be just done like on a computer. So you also cannot do this in the open, like by any means. So like you need an RF enclosure that you can likely get from eBay or maybe rent it somewhere, but it needs to be big enough to kind of fit these couple things that are in the slide. So you need a drone, and then you see it's like a completely random drone. It's AI generated, so this is not to put target on anybody else. It's like some random drone, and you need propellers removed. So when propellers are removed, the motors can run, but the drone will not take off. It will not break off anything. But if you forget to remove them when you're testing, you will know quickly enough that that was a bad decision. after things, like I've done that before, and then it was not a fun time. So then you have the controller and of course your SDR. So all of these again need to be included in this enclosure, and the enclosure has to be closed so no RF signals can come in or out. and then you can perform any type of testing that you want from your laptop that's connected to the outside of this. And then I'm going to pass it over to Jack.
Yeah, so in addition to all of the like hardware, to an extent, some of the software we talked about, a lot of these drones have dependencies, right? We kind of talked about GPS, right? A lot of these drones depend very heavily on GPS for position holding and stability above about 30 meters during daytime operations or, at all times at night. So that's important. Then there are a good number of like service tie-ins, right? These are APIs generally provided by a manufacturer or a third party to allow either fleet or individual management of these drones. So from a fleet standpoint, like, hey, I'm a surveying company. Where are my, 15 really fancy drones flying today? Cool. Someone's hooning it. They crashed it. Like, doesn't matter, right? We have immutable proof of that. And then at an individual level, these are used for things like controlling warranty, controlling like, where the heck did this thing go when it flew away from me? Ownership, those sorts of things to connect it to external services. At the same time, the drone doesn't so much depend on it, but it definitely emits, on its own separate channel is going to be the Open Drone ID and the Remote ID. And both of those are transponder protocols used by the drone to ensure that the real-time position of not only the drone, but also the real-time position of the operator is broadcast so that, if someone's messing around with it where they shouldn't be, they're in a no-fly zone, et cetera, right? These things are all set up to give proof that a drone was somewhere versus somewhere a drone wasn't. Cool. So a little bit into our methodology when we actually started attacking these things. All of these drones were personally purchased from eBay or obtained via like other means.
Yeah, like the left truck and stuff like that.
Yeah. So no worries there, but we performed all of our testing in an RF environment or an RF enclosure with the propellers removed. So safety, we're not concerned there, right? But we're trying to address a little bit like the current state of security in the UAS space. And I think we're going to dive into that. And you guys will get a pretty good feel for it.
Yeah, so again, just to reiterate on the objective. So we're here looking to assess the state, see where it is, see if we can improve it, see if we can find some cool hacks, and then just see, hey, like, are these systems ultimately secure? Because the manufacturers are required by put some of these protections for safety. So if these can be bypassed, that's pretty bad, and we kind of want them fixed.
Cool. So let's get a foothold on our smart controller here. This is a random manufacturer's smart controller. All right, we're not here to pick on manufacturers, but as you can see here, we're running, wonderful Android 6.01. Strikes its head again with security patch level of like 2016, which I'm pretty sure is like the latest security. I don't know who's pushing security patches for 6.01 to your smart controller that's not connected to the Google Play Store at this point. So from there, we all know it's pretty easy. We're going to go ahead and we're going to fire up ADB. All right. Once we have ADB, we'll push up, just simple dirty cow exploit to gain root on the device. Once again, we're running Android versions that are so old that we don't need to do any kind of super fancy root exploit, any super fancy kind of, flashing of firmware onto the smart controller, like nothing. It's just coming more or less the front door at this point. So we flash that up, execute it, get a reverse shell back. You can see we've rooted the smart controller at this point. So now we can, tear through this thing. We gain persistence by just setting like our build prop so that ADB starts as root every single time during our testing. And cool. So first point of interest here is going to be remote ID. And the FAA billets remote ID as kind of like a license plate for drones, right? It's the idea being that like, if you see someone speeding down your road, you can be like, I saw the license plate. It was this car. Someone can go talk to them, right? Somebody crashes a car. You can use the license plate to figure out whose car it is, so on and so forth. But unlike a license plate, when I drive my car around, my car isn't constantly broadcasting my license plate. My license plate doesn't contain my VIN number. My license plate doesn't contain my current location, so on and so forth, right? Because like fundamentally, all you have to do is fire up some kind of remote ID receiver and find a location of someone who is very preoccupied with a very expensive piece of equipment that you could just like come and borrow from them. So remote ID is remote ID, right? It's an important factor in the safety space, but like my opinions vary.
Yeah, and the assumption here is like if this is requires to be a license plate, it cannot be taken off. So that's like the assumption.
Yeah. So remote ID is a broadcast-based protocol, right? It's generally baked into the transponder link. So you can't just like flick a switch and turn it off. You can't flick a switch and, remove it. There's no unscrewing of your license plate, for lack of a better term. So by doing so, this should always be transmitting. It cannot be tampered with, and that is a requirement for it to be certified by various regulatory agencies in like all sorts of countries like the US. So it can come in either a Wi-Fi form or a Bluetooth form. In the Wi-Fi form, it's going to be just like a traditional Wi-Fi beacon broadcast, like anything that can receive, your traditional Wi-Fi beacon. So like all your air crack setups, so on and so forth. You can pull it straight into Wireshark. There are Wireshark decoders for remote ID, and you can immediately gain that information, parse it straight through. It's a very well documented open protocol, and it's intentionally unencrypted. They want you to be able to be like, I saw this thing here. If your license plate was encrypted, it wouldn't do nearly as much good. So,
and then the places that ultimately need to police this have specialized receivers that are able, like they don't have to build this from scratch. Like they already have systems that are built to receive this. So.
Yeah, there's a multi-million-dollar market in selling essentially air crack Wi-Fi cards that you can install at your airport or your power plant, and so on and so forth. So tearing into the code here, right? We have this is all pseudo coded out, so like good luck. Hey, does this drone support remote ID? I don't know. Let's see if the remote ID switch is enabled, which is, that's like a pretty typical approach here. But like, honestly, what if we just simplified that to like return false, right? Because like, I don't actually need, I should be transmitting remote ID. As an attacker, I don't really need to transmit remote ID. So why don't we just patch in false? In an insane world, this would be as simple as like, using JADX to decompile the APK. All right, we pull apart the APK, we make our changes in like relatively friendly Java. Then we would, push this like Android Studio, we'd compile it, we'd sign it, we'd push it out. But that's only in a sane world, right? Because instead what we have is, we have Android 601, all right? So you have to sign it with SHA-1, and you can't sign SHA-1 because Java won't let you sign with a SHA-1 on a current version. So it's like, do we want to sit there and like build this weird dev environment? No, we can make it even funnier, even simpler, if you will, right? We can sit on our drone, on our smart controller, and we can go download APK tool M. It comes from a .su domain, so it's got like all sorts of bonus features in there, right? It's got all sorts of fun. We can run it on device, and it runs all the way back to Android 4. So that's pretty cool, right? So cool, right? We have our SAML files, right? Because we don't get a full decompile because we're on device, but Android ships with all of the tools required to build the app on the actual platform. So like, what's a better Android 6 development environment than Android 6 itself? So we pull it apart on there. Then comes the fun. And the fun is you get like 4 lines of text on this like super low DPI screen. So this was a lot of fun. Thankfully, it was just like, return false. But if we were actually trying to add functionality or something, we definitely want to like break this out and do a push and pull, right? We were timetable crunched on our access to some of these platforms. So, there's a lot of like, well, why not just like SFTP it up, SCP? Like, yes, there's multiple ways to skin this cat, but, time is of the essence here. So we do that. We recompile our application. We sign it up real nice with APK tool M. And, we turn our remote ID situation from a huge packet here with, our location, operator's location, to no more remote ID. And we can completely strip the remote ID off of the drone from the smart controller with tools that we can download directly to the smart controller. No external computers needed. There's no verification on the drone, right? There's not even a signature match on the drone that the application version is valid, right? There's absolutely nothing there. It's just, okay, you're pushing up a config that says it doesn't need remote ID. Guess we don't need remote ID. And now remote ID is gone, which is, that's fantastic. So the next thing we start looking for is, we're looking around, all right? We got, all these little build props, all these little functions in the application, a lot of interesting lines, right? But the one that's catches my eye is security, which
very interesting.
Well, yeah, I find it very interesting. We're running Android 6, and you're asking me, is security? And I guess they did get it right. Is security does equal false. So like,
they're not wrong.
I can't fault them, right? So where is security used? Like, was it like what's going on? Like, what security are we missing here? So what functions look at it? Well, we have is support anti-interference, which is a function that goes ahead and it connects to the radio chipset on the drone and starts pushing an anti-jamming configuration to the drone, which like, wow, it's really interesting from a security standpoint. I mean, I guess we did kind of mention jamming could pose a security threat to these platforms, right? So, okay, I like it. Is support SK42XY? Show of hands, who knows what SK42 is? Yeah, no, I didn't think so either, because I didn't know what SK42 was either. SK42, you know, for those inclined, changes it from, you know, traditional decimal lat long, right? UTM, UTG coordinate systems that we would normally use to an obsolete Soviet coordinate system, right? That is only in use by very specific, formerly Soviet country, all right? So that's interesting, right? And then is support AI targets all, which is like, huh? I wonder what targets is certainly an interesting choice of verbiage. AI, right? Like that's good news. I'm gonna get like a venture capital acquisition out of this presentation. So, right. So okay, like what classes of does this AI detect, right? So off the bat, we got animal. All right, cool. Maybe you're looking for like livestock. You're looking for sheep, car, boat, right? Like okay, cool. I want to know, is the sheep gonna get run over by a boat? Okay. Yeah.
Like maybe there are boats nearby. You want to avoid that.
Yeah.
I mean, useful stuff.
People, right? People are people, and people trespass. People, where did he go? I want to take a photo of them. Okay, cool. Electric pole. We're getting a bit spicy here,
Maybe like electric utility company.
Yeah, I'm using this to survey critical infrastructure. That's a good idea with Android 6.
Yeah, could definitely be useful.
Civilian.
Whoa.
That's kind of an interesting one, right? Because what comes after the word civilian in the lexicon?
Yeah, let's check out this guy.
Soldier. All right. So the AI processor here is classing people as civilians, soldiers,
and then what else?
Armored vehicles,
and then
aircraft. Right.
Wow.
So being that this drone should be flown near the airport, why are we classifying aircraft? Why are we classifying critical infrastructure? And more importantly, like, why is the drone classifying people as potentially combatants and non-combatants with like AI? Like what data set is that trained off of? And like what questions does this possibly rise, right? But the fundamental flaw here is every single one of these drones from this manufacturer that ships, right? You could go and you could buy one direct from the manufacturer in the continental United States today, and it will ship with an AI coprocessor that is actively flying around and tagging people as civilians or soldiers. It is simply just not displaying that information to you because you don't have his security permissions.
Yeah, and these are completely commercial. Like everybody who's buying this is getting these extra features, and they have no clue because the only way to know about is securities to do this work.
It's baked entirely into the off-the-shelf software, right? And as we've all seen so far today, thankfully there's no way that anyone could just flip the switch in that software, Android 6 APK Tool M, and enable militarized AI targeting on off-the-shelf commercial drones.
Yeah, wow.
So, next question we're going to deal with, right? As if that wasn't, enough fun, is no-fly zones, right? These no-fly zones are restricted airspace, right? So these are generally enforced by a manufacturer more so than a country, right? Like there are a couple countries that have like, hey, if your drone operates in this area, we arrest all the executives, right? Cool. So these are pretty well baked in. These are things like airports, power plants, military bases, so on and so forth. The drone really shouldn't be there. There's really not a good use case for it to be there. So, naturally what we do is we reach out over, SSL. Hey, that's a great sign, right? We reach out over SSL to fetch the no-fly zone data for a specific country with a specific version ID. Cool, right? But it's SSL, right? So we're good. That's all the security we need in transit. But they were nice enough to create it with trust all certs. They were nice enough to even put a custom interceptor that they left enabled for debugging purposes. So we can go ahead and now we can serve no-fly zones from whatever SSL cert we want. All right, we can go ahead. We can impersonate the manufacturer on our local server and start pushing stuff down. Cool. So it's like a big, ugly, encrypted JSON base64 block of text. And it's got like AES 256. So like, man, dude, like we're really not even going to get into it. Like it's a difficult one, right? No. Thankfully, they put the key to decrypt the no-fly zone in plain text in the application, and it was the name of the company. Identities have been changed to protect the innocent, or I guess the guilty. So that's cool. That's cool. But like, we didn't even need to really go that far. Like, why even decrypt the data, right? Because instead, why don't we just serve data from Kazakhstan, right, as the data from US? Because there's no actual component in that JSON array that says, hey, this is US data. Use this in the US. Instead, I could simply tell the drone, download the latest US data, and I feed it data from Kazakhstan. So if my drone manages to fly from Pasadena to Kazakhstan, I might have some issues, but I've definitely discovered like infinite energy or something at that point. So, that they probably balance out in the end. But so we don't even need to decrypt it. We can just serve whatever we want because SSL is entirely broken, which was nice of them. So, not content, right? Not content with beating on the platform. Let's beat on the manufacturer's APIs a little bit, all right? These are, once again, used for, proving ownership from like a warranty standpoint. They're used for holding control of the drone. Hey, where did this thing last fly? What are my last flight missions, flight logs? Huge trail of breadcrumbs if you were trying to investigate, UAS that were misbehaving, right? You could definitely subpoena the manufacturer for this data, right? So this is some interesting stuff, right? So, here's our register product function, right? So, it's calling for a simple URL, which, I wonder how that SSL is, right? With, 4 parameters. We have customer code, aircraft serial number, token, and then something called sign, right? And these are all derived from something that the application clearly has access to. So first one's going to be customer code, which I guess we're just putting in a shared preference that's unencrypted on the Android host system. So you can go ahead and access that from basically anyone on the Android device can reach that, which is super nice. And this is some kind of identifier for the specific install. So every time you install this app in, I don't know, even an emulator, you get a valid customer code. So we got 1 out of 4 pieces of the puzzle. Show me piece number 2. Piece number 2, serial number, right? Like, I don't know where we could find the serial number, but like written on the drone. Oh, wait. Thankfully, Remote ID transmits the serial number of the aircraft to everybody within line of sight of the aircraft. So, something I know, something I have. Well, someone else's something that I have now. But, we would only ever do this with our serial numbers for our aircraft because we're good like that. Token is cool. Token is some giant Java web token that quite literally never expires. So, I've got one. I'm good. I'm good for life. All right. So now we're at 3 out of 4. All right. The fourth one, surely the fourth one is something that is like controlled by the manufacturer. It's something like super advanced we can't reach, right? No, actually, it's an MD5 hash of the previous 3, which is like, oh, I guess that's one way to have a checksum. Bonus points for MD5. We all know that's a really good one. So now that we control all of the variables to register or tell their manufacturer API server that I own this aircraft, we can go and we can pull partial email addresses out of everyone who owns these drones. The serial numbers are sequential, so we can walk up and down with our valid customer code, our valid information, and we can enumerate a possible database of every single individual who owns these drones. Hypothetically, yes. So we can transfer ownership, right? So you go to log into your drone and you don't own it anymore. It's actually mine. I'll be taking that. I'll be putting in for some warranty replacements. Actually, maybe I cancel the warranty. I don't know, man. Like, it's mine now, right? This doesn't mean I can like spin it up and like fly it into your head while you're sleeping, but like, I think if they had that functionality, they would have connected it to this API based on what we're seeing. And we can tell the last flight location. We can look at historical flights, so on and so forth, because all of these are probably stored by the manufacturer based on serial number rather than owner. So that transfer of ownership, now that serial number belongs to me, now I will be looking what you've been doing with your drone or deleting it, breadcrumbs be gone.
So now we'll talk a little bit about like some of the other like also fancier stuff. We won't be talking about this specific target that we talked about earlier for kind of reasons, but generally, right, to execute a drone takeover, it requires like 3 things. So it requires first understanding of the protocol. We talked earlier about like some of the examples of that. So that's one part. Then the second part is like, okay, like most of these were like completely unencrypted, which is kind of like fun, right? So like it's like we don't have to do anything, but if they are encrypted, and we'll kind of go over some cases of like how that can be kind of bypassed. And then the other part is either deauthenticating or impersonating the remote. Yeah. So here we have a specific kind of like open source paper that like, kind of details some of this stuff. So this one is using like an XP transmitter, and it has like very specific fields that can either be garnered by like reverse engineering or doing any of the things that we have done, or just like listening it like over the air, demodulating, and then figuring out what all the fields are. And then all these things are generally very well documented. So this one has the PAN ID, the baud rate, the channel, and then the destination address that's kind of split in two. And what this requires is essentially like most of these fields are kind of preset and they're kind of guaranteed to be that way. The only part that is needed is this PAN ID. Once you have that, you can deauthenticate the controller. As we saw earlier, this is using the greatest Wi-Fi security called WEP. It is so secure, like extremely secure. So once you kind of break that, you join the network, then you can just start sending these commands. And then from there, you can kind of specify what you want the drone to do, and the drone will just do that. If you need to deauthenticate the controller, you would either send it like a Wi-Fi deauthentication packet, or you would like max boot and things like that. So that's our drone example 1. So now we go to drone example 2. This one used more secure Wi-Fi WPA with pre-shared key. And in this case, now we can deauthenticate the controller with AirPlay MG, and then we're going to capture the hash. And then once the hash has been captured, we can crack it with AirCrack MG. I mean, that is a very general way of hacking Wi-Fi networks, and this is just a flying Wi-Fi network. And then once connected, we get onto a network, and then all of these drones are using 192.168.10 IP address, like in that range, and they're almost using this. And like this is across the board, like across various different things. They're always using this network for some reason. So when you're on the network, you can either run like an nmap or something like that, and then just figure out that this port is open. And this specific drone, essentially, like you would connect to it, and you would send it a command. So it's specifically called command, and that expects a follow-up command. And then the next one there can be just, okay, land, and the drone will land. The other part can be take off, or many other parts, right? Like you can build an entire platform around it to essentially start controlling it. But like if a bunch of these drones, right, that have been assessed, right, if they all start flying towards you, like let's say even in a swarm or anything like that, you can just, okay, deauthenticate the controller and then send it a land, and they will all fall off the sky. So doing the takeover part. Then we go back to enhanced Wi-Fi. So that must be like super great, right? No, still uses web. So in this case, we have the remote controller and the drone that are communicating. And in this case, we're going to join their network by cracking web. So that requires us gathering IVs and then all the other parts. And then we crack the key to the network, and then we join the network. And of course, this is cracking web with client, which means that we already have a client that's the drone and the controller, right? So, and then in this case, we will do the ARP spoofing. We would impersonate the remote controller, and then after that, we can just kind of talk to it. So this specific paper here, they did a full-blown investigation into this and reverse engineering of the protocol that was being used. And they directly identified every single movement of the joystick and correlated that to specific movements. So like moving left, right, up, down. So using this, one can easily say, okay, like steer it this way or do anything like that. Maybe even attach it to like a keyboard and then start moving around, or like program another controller. Like just about anything here by just essentially cracking the cracking their connection. This was encrypted. All of these were encrypted. We join it, and then from there, we send the message and then do that part. So the other part is, so these were kind of like special cases that were being used. One of the most kind of popular currently, at least on the small UAS side, is Mablink. So that one is widely used. If you want to build your own drone, you would most likely fall into Mablink. Like there's not many alternatives that are actually good. So first we talk about Mablink 1. This one is kind of older protocol, but like it it is still being used, and we're going to talk about Mavlink 2 in a second. But the way Mavlink 1 works, you have your STX field that starts with always FE, that is to indicate that it is Mavlink V1 packet. And then from there, you have your length sequencing, and then system ID identifies the drone. So given that, one of those system IDs is your like ground station or the remote controller, it can control up to 254 drones simultaneously from that setup using this protocol. So that's the protocol limitation. You can scale up to 254 drones. And then the component ID that kind of breaks down different components from within the aircraft that can directly communicate over Mavlink that you can set it. And then your message ID just tells the ground station how to interpret your payload. So if you're sending a heartbeat message to say, hey, I'm still here, we're still connected, or any other type of message, you're essentially that is telling it how to interpret it. So that payload. And then the last part is checksum. So like checksum is like integrity, air quotes. I mean, like that like this can be computed by anybody. Like these are very well known, and you can just easily compute this. So this one has 0 encryption because there is no encryption used or anywhere supported by Mavlink V1. This, I would not even call this integrity, because this just makes sure that the message arrives on the other side successfully. So there's no security or anything like that. So if a drone is flying and you identify that it's Mavlink, well, first you can eavesdrop it. You can fully understand it. These specs are fully available like online on GitHub, and you can just directly ingest it and fully decode it. And you can see exactly what all these messages are. You can break it down into what the payload is, what it means, like what both sides of the communication, like you can see everything that is happening. And then the second part to that, okay, now that you have identified the system ID, you know what the drone is, you can just send it a command, and it will accept it. Mavlink V1 drones will just accept commands. You don't have to do anything other than that. It will just accept the command. The only part, like maybe some people say, oh, you have a sequencing number, but sequencing number does not matter. There's a vulnerability in both Mavlink V1 and V2 where it kind of ignores the sequencing. So that's kind of like another kind of fun fact. But like, even if it doesn't, because you have an already existing channel to like read it and sense it, you can just, okay, I'll just add +1 on the sequencing number. And then the other part is it only has 255 and just rolls over. So like you can just kind of wait and send a bunch of messages until it gets accepted. And then we go into Mavlink V2. So Mavlink V2 added like this greatest thing. It's called the signature. Whoa. And it only has like 3 different pieces. It has like the link ID that kind of tells it like, what's being used. It has the MAC, and it has again the part of the checksum that's being used as part of the signature. So this part actually does have some security, meaning that it's going to prevent people from sending unauthorized commands, like it was very easily possible with Mavlink V1. But in this case, like people are still using like super simple, like just like we saw earlier with the manufacturer name. These are very easy to break with the dictionary attack. And then once you break that, then you can do the same exact thing. Again, these are not encrypted. The spec is public, so you already kind of know the protocol. Like the only part is, okay, you just have to break this like secret key that's usually like very, very simple, like usually less than like 8 characters. So it's like very easy to brute force. And then once you can do that, then you can just start commanding it. And there are open source controllers that you can attach this to, and then start controlling these drones after you do the takeover. And again, these are in the open RF. You just have to figure out what frequency it is and then start working on it. And then on the Mavlink side, like we have like a vast majority of things, like, right, like you can jam it, DDoS, like they're kind of susceptible to everything. And these are also being used by a lot of different things. And the other interesting part, right, like we've heard a lot about FPV drones. A lot of people talk about FPV drones, so they're like kind of like the new thing now, but they're not anything special. So like they use a VTX that's usually unencrypted, and they're just sending down the feed. And then these FPV cameras are sending the feed completely unencrypted. So using something like New Radio's GR NTSC-RC repository, you can just kind of connect this to almost any SDR, and then you can just start capturing the video feed live. So drone is flying, or any FPV camera used anywhere, it doesn't have to be on a drone, you can start intercepting it at 5.8 gigahertz, or maybe there's set up for 2.4 as well. And so, yeah, so you have like 2 different frequencies, and if they're running, you can just capture it and you know exactly where they're located. Now let's go with it.
Cool. So we've been kind of beating on the drones, right? Partially they deserve it, but partially not, right? The real question here becomes is like, can we beat on the countermeasures a little bit too? And the answer is like, yeah. So like, what are we going after from the drone countermeasure standpoint? Countermeasure. So we're going to enter Open Drone ID OSM, which is the most popular remote ID Open Drone ID receiving app. It's going to be once again on Android. iOS doesn't really let you receive Wi-Fi beacons. So all of these apps have like terrible reviews from people that are like, it didn't work on my like Samsung S50. It doesn't let like expose beacons. And it's like, well, man, like I don't think that's the app's fault, but great open source app, right? It supports both Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. And it actually works surprisingly well. I'm able to really spot drones when I'm just like out and traveling and all that. But click. So we want to fuzz it, right? But like just attaching a harness to the Android code is it's not going to give us a true approximation of the actual attack. The actual attack is going to be coming in through that Android network stack, then to the application. So if that's the case, right, we need a way to rapidly fuzz our Android device. Now, right out of the bat, the Android devices, as you can see here, the later the Android device version, the more restrictive they get on how many times you can query for networks, how many times you can look for those beacons. But you know what they're not restricting is Bluetooth. So by contrast, remote ID can come over Bluetooth as well. So like, why don't we just take Bluetooth low energy and we just start feeding it a gorillion requests per second and see where that gets us? Click. Cool. So enter the aptly named remote ID fuzzer.py that I'll be releasing here probably in the coming week. This is a little Python series of scripts that uses that real network interface. That real network interface is going to be inside of a radio frequency shielding enclosure, right? Don't be broadcasting remote ID haphazardly, please. It supports, uses SCAPI, so it'll connect up to your Wi-Fi card if you've got it. It'll use, monitor mode on that to start sending promiscuous packets. And then it supports an ESP32 and the NRF chipsets for Bluetooth, right? So it'll command those microcontrollers over serial with a series of payloads. And right now we're at about 5,000 different kinds of payloads, and this ranges from like flooding attacks to like fragmented packets, invalid headers, partial packets, like really like what can we get with remote ID? And the answer is, I don't know, the README, that's really important. Click. Cool. Video demo time. So what we're doing in this video here is we're using remote ID fuzzer.py against it to send, tens of drones per second. And by doing this, we can outpace the application's ability to render open street tiles, So it just basically blocks out the screen from anyone trying to receive remote ID. And this is being exploited because each individual new MAC address is treated as a new drone. So we spawn a new MAC address, we transmit one packet, we change our MAC address, one packet, we change our MAC, et cetera, right? That creates, infinity drones as fast as we can change our MAC address, get the chipset back up and broadcasting. Then the application's logic is being exploited because the application itself scrolls to the location of the recent most drone. So if I just spawn one drone on one side of the planet, one drone on the other side of the planet, this thing will try to smooth scroll all of the tiles between here and there. It doesn't matter if you're fully connected to gigabit connection. It's going to outpace the ability for even the renderer to render it. So you can effectively block it out. And that's one of the more fun results, right? We have got success with crashes. We don't have remote code execution yet, but we're getting really close, I'm thinking, towards like coming in over remote ID to like punch this thing in the face. Cool. So, we got a couple more things. Sorry, I know I'm trying to get you guys out of here. I'll hold you hostage with the remote ID talk. So fancy receivers, right? I kind of mentioned these earlier, right? These are the ones that are going to be at like your airports. They're going to be at like, here, there, everywhere, right? These devices, right? Generally, they're going to have some kind of cool web interface for like normal Earth people to be able to read that, and that's fed from a SQL database. So allow me to posit a pure hypothetical here that never ever would have ever happened. All right. So like we're sending remote ID packets, but we just put generic malicious strings in there. All right. Like you can go as low as the eCar test file. You can go as high as, putting actual malware as your serial number of your drone. All right. What happens when that's written to the SQL database on disk. And then what happens when that endpoint protection on that host then starts to isolate the SQL database and starts fighting the disk itself? What happens to the ability for this to actually detect drones? I don't know. It'll be really interesting to find out. I don't know. We don't know. But yeah, so next steps here, right? Our goal with all this is to improve UAS security, right? We want to inform future standards and regulations. I don't like that word. We want to mitigate these classes of vulnerabilities. And the cold hard truth is that there are no good alternatives, right? We've kept this manufacturer agnostic for many reasons, one of which being that it's across the board. Like everyone is as bad as it's running Android 6, my man. It's like no signing, no remote ID. Take out the remote ID, throw something at the remote ID receiver. This place is a mess. We need talented people like you guys to get in here and start punching these drones, start punching these counter drone detection systems in the face. And these manufacturers are effectively putting themselves on like a super short plank with all of this, because if they don't fix this stuff, they're going to get regulated out of existence. And that's an L for the manufacturer. That's an L for you as the user who wants to just fly around their drone. And it's just a loss for our technical advancement as a whole here. So, man, we really could use more people looking at it, right? I know that a couple of you in the audience were looking with some really questioning eyes when you would see things, and you really, we've sparked at least some interest with some of you. But let's get out there, let's tear up some drones, y'all. Cool.
Oh.
And I think we've held this room for a little bit too long. So we're gonna go ahead and bounce off the stage. And if you just find me with your questions, I'm more than happy to chat about this stuff. But thank you all for being a wonderful audience.
Should that?